cookies and stuff, but it helps a lot.
I think that's what I have to do. All right, you guys, this is Iceman. I'm back. I had a shutdown. I know I've been buffering, so there's other people down here that have a more efficient stream.
Portland Patriots.
Portland Patriots on X is streaming now, and we have more streamers coming, so you guys can.
I have to wear this because of how violent you are. I literally have to fucking wear armor.
Do you think that
so fucking violent.
You think
ever
that
ever since these fucking chuds, these MAGA motherfuckers started coming down here causing violence? That's why I had to get a fucking bulletproof vest, because y'all keep fucking pulling weapons on us.
Do you think Travis
All we're sitting here doing is protesting, and you're just trying to piggyback on it because you don't fucking stand for anything.
Well,
you stand for
we have the
absolutely
same.
nothing.
We have the same First
That's
Amendment
the
right you do.
problem.
Normal.
Y'all come down here to agitate.
No,
That's why you are here.
What's interesting
go
is
home. If you don't agree with what we do, then go home. Why expose yourself to it if you don't like it? Now fuck off.
why are you so hostile tonight? Normally you're a little bit less hostile.
Because I'm sick of people getting assaulted. I'm sick of having fucking firearms pulled on us.
Do you think
That's
that?
why.
Do you think
That's
Travis?
why I'm coming up to you.
Well, Travis.
Have I ever come up to any of these motherfuckers? No.
Well, what about
But I'm
Travis?
coming up because y'all need to fucking understand what's going on in the real.
Well, actually, you
world.
did. You sucker punched Stacy Pritchard
She
a couple months
fucking
ago.
hit me first.
Yeah,
She
but
first was
she's
ready to
a
go,
girl.
raise my cheek, and then I warned her. I said, if you touch me again, I'm gonna fucking hit you back.
But
and then she did, and I'm a person of my word.
But you were just
If I
saying we
said
shouldn't
that I
have
will
any
hit
violence.
You back if you touch me again.
But you just said we shouldn't have any violence.
I didn't instigate the violence. I do believe in self-defense.
Okay.
Now fuck off.
Well, there's that. Well, let's.
How we were agitating.
No.
Walking around.
The other day, she was very calm with
And
me.
you're not the only people that you carry. Keep
Well,
that shit in mind.
Freedom of assembly, freedom of speech,
Exactly. That's what we're practicing.
Freedom of speech.
right? Right?
Yep. Freedom of
First Amendment rights. Everybody's got them. There's our friend Richard here at the inflation station. Hey.
Gnarly. I can't do something.
Do what?
Did someone tell you they pulled out a gun?
Someone told me that they pulled out a gun.
Oh, okay.
I saw the guy in the car, but I didn't see any gun. I saw him heckling. He drove up that street and he stopped right there, but I didn't see anything. That girl over there is really aggressive with the sign. She's back. She came up to me yelling and screaming and almost hit me with her sign. And then this guy who's on the corner right here is talking to Richard. He's been really aggressive tonight. So yeah, it's been one of those nights, one of those crazy nights. So I'm just kind of taking it easy. I don't think there's going to be much more than a few of us down here. So we have to stay together, I suppose. But I didn't plan on being out here more than an hour or so. I was taking a more philosophical viewpoint, but it didn't last very long. So maybe I'll go talk philosophy with Chandler over there. We'll see what he has to say. That's always where my stream dies too, so who knows. All right, you guys, are we buffering here? How's it going? You guys, I don't see any comments in the chat, so that either means it's buffering or it's not streaming. So here we are. Patriot Corner is pretty empty today. But as you can see, Antifa is very active. They've taken over the inflation station corner. They've taken over that side of the street. They've taken over the trolley station. They got rid of the, they used to have the mannequins down there, but the mannequins are gone. Hey guys, if you can put in the stream, is it buffering still? Did you have to restart? Yeah, I had to restart. If you guys see my stream die, it's because it just died. So 5 minutes after that, I'll be restreaming. But Portland Patriot is streaming here today, and I think there'll probably be other people down here later, hopefully. I guess you could watch Pretend Media, but he's a chump, so you don't want to watch him. But yeah, we're just down here He's static. He just stays in one place and just films the empty building, which is so stupid because all he does is film an empty building that nobody ever comes out of and nothing ever happens. So he's lucky. It's like, I don't know, it's like fishing in the same place all the time, and you fish for 3 hours and maybe you'll get a bite, maybe you don't, but I'm the kind of fisherman. Hi, how are you?
Nice to meet you. I'm Ash.
Hi,
You're
Ash.
Chris.
I am.
Nice to meet you. I was wondering if you'd be open to an interview with a journalism student.
Sure, I would love to, Ash. Can I film you? Is that okay?
Yeah.
I'm just on
everybody
X.
films
I
me
have
on
all
here
of
a lot, so
My chat told me to come.
I study journalism at LBCC.
Hold on just a second, Ash. What's it say? I can't read this. Who is?
Pretend media.
Oh, yeah. I'm not surprised.
Okay.
He always is. So, yeah, was this okay right here?
Yeah. Is there like what do you stand for? What is your reason to be out here? You know what I mean?
So, yeah, I'm a long-term resident of Portland, Oregon, and I'm here because this is a historical moment in our city's history, and I'm here to document what's going on and to get, like you are, different points of view from people on their perspective and try to understand where people are politically and philosophically, and to hopefully find out if there's a middle ground and see if we can get towards a middle ground that's nonviolent and more solution-oriented. But sometimes I feel like there is, and sometimes I feel like there isn't. So it's always different.
What would your solution to whether you believe this is right or wrong, whatever? What would your in a perfect world your solution be to this?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say a perfect world, but that's a great question. So the question was, what would my solution be? So I look at it as there's 2 points of view here. There's the status quo, which is our current form of government and our form of capitalism. And then there's the alternative point of view, which is to abolish ICE, abolish our president, abolish the form of government that we have, and start over with, open borders and a whole different form of viewpoints that doesn't involve capitalism. So I think that idealistically, if we were to just entertain that idea for a while, you would find that it would take literally centuries of civil unrest to get to that point, because people, not just me, but people all over would fight it. Not just, even if, let's just say it happened here in Oregon or it happened in the United States. If the left had their way, ICE closed down and went away, we had socialism everywhere, there was no president, we had open borders. If we had all that in Oregon, it still wouldn't solve the problem, because we'd have the rest of the United States and we'd have the rest of the world. So while it's an idealistic point of view, it's to me an unrealistic point of view. So I always say that resistance is futile. We're better off to work towards a solution within our existing form of government and try to find a middle ground.
So what would your, in a legislative point of view, right? What would your solution to that be? Or do you have one? Is there a vague idea you have in mind? You know what I mean? Yeah,
that is another great question. So we get accused a lot here in our point of view of being fascist, right? Of being like a totalitarian system who uses, we have one point of view and we use the military to squash all of our opponents. Well, in our society, in our republic right now, we don't have that, because we have a legislature, we have courts, and we have the president. So even if the president wanted one point, and even if the legislature agreed with the president, we still have the court. So we have this balance of power, and we see this happen all the time where...
So what about Venezuela?
What about what?
What about Venezuela? Because those courts and systems and legislature wasn't followed during that.
Yeah, so again, I guess I would be called a nationalist in the sense that I was born in Oregon, and I'm an American, and I live in America, and America has always been very good to me. So while things that happen around the world are interesting to me, I'm not a globalist in the sense that what Venezuela happens or what happens in Iran or in other countries.
Our government, we went in.
It's secondary or tertiary, meaning it would be a secondary or third consideration.
If it's our direct actions, I think it would fall under the category. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that would fall under the category of our current issues here in America.
Yeah.
No? Because
no. It's a great question, and it had a direct. We had a direct example of that just tonight. When I first got here and I got out of the car, right around the corner, there were 4 police officers with one person who was on drug, who looks like they were either on tranq or on fentanyl, right? They were bent over and they were having what many people would call a mental health crisis or a drug crisis. So it's literally right here where we are today. but there's less of that now because of the actions that we're taking in Venezuela. I mean, the drugs come from somewhere. They don't necessarily come from Venezuela, but they might come through Venezuela. So by us taking direct military action outside of the borders of the government to help the people in the United States and to have less people die of drug addiction, I'm all for that, absolutely.
So let's say that that stuff is true about Venezuela, that they bring drugs in, right? I don't necessarily know if that's true. It was never proven, so I don't know. I'm not going to act like I know because I'm not, you know what I mean, out there on the boats. Exactly.
Okay.
But let's say all that is true.
Okay.
You didn't really answer my question about our legislative policy and courts not being followed because Donald Trump himself did not go through the legislative processes we have to do that. He didn't address Congress. He didn't contact anyone before he did that. In fact, he actually said that he went out of his way to hide it from our legislative process.
Great question, great point. Yeah, so we have a legislative process, as you said, and we have a Congress, and we have elected officials who can change the laws of the United States. Donald Trump is operating under the existing laws of the United States, many of which were put in place and supported by previous Democratic presidents and previous Democratic administrations. Well, there's many of them. I mean, we could talk all day about the different laws, but there are laws, especially the laws about for immigration, for example. Donald Trump is just enforcing the laws of immigration that have been on the books for years. He's not changing the laws.
It's a civil case, so immigration is under the category of civil cases, which means that you go through civil circuit court to deal with those issues. That's what it's under the legal category. I would know, actually. I study law. So it's under circuit court. You would go to circuit court for those issues like you would for a speeding ticket or like you would for, other tickets that are minor citations. The only time ICE is actually supposed to be utilized is if we have a very violent offender. And I mean, we're seeing with the Renee Good shooting and the shooting of Alex, I forgot his last name, but multiple shootings and kidnappings of American citizens consistently. I mean, the numbers just keep going up. So we're seeing that in real time. Like the way ICE is being utilized is not in the legal way that it's supposed to be.
Well, let's use the same example from earlier tonight. Let's say that you happen to come along the scene that I happen to come along today, where the 4 police officers were detaining. These are Portland police officers. Were detaining a person here on the street because of drug. Now, if you were to go in the middle of that and intervene and push away the cops or to get in the cops' way, would you not expect them to take some action to stop your actions to interfere with their law enforcement? Because that's exactly what happened in the Renee Good. She could have driven away. She could have not even showed up. Well, she did reluctantly. But prior to that, she was blocking the road. And while it's tragic that somebody lost her life, it's actions that she took that led to that loss of life. And it was the same with Pretty. Pretty was carrying a gun with additional magazines.
That's legal in his state, is it not?
Well,
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, you are wrong, actually. He was carrying it illegally because he didn't have any identification on him. And part of the rules of having a gun is you have to have identification with you.
So
and he didn't. And in his case as well, he didn't forgot his license. I wouldn't say he forgot that. And he also has a history. I saw the video like everybody else.
But you weren't there with him.
No, but what's interesting is what's been reported and what we've all observed in the videos is we've all observed the same thing, and yet people have different points of view on this.
But the laws are that you're allowed to carry a gun if you are licensed to do so. Now, be that as it may, he didn't have his license. Okay, that's understandable. Maybe apprehending him is the correct thing to do in that situation. Killing him is not. And let me say this to the group. Let's be reminded that, the cops are supposed to kill innocent or guilty people either. They're not supposed to kill innocent people. They're also not supposed to kill guilty people.
Well, nobody's supposed to kill anybody. And how many innocent citizens of the United States have been killed by illegal aliens that are here that shouldn't have been here lawfully?
Do you know who the target demographic of mass shootings is?
I know that the most recent mass shooting. I don't agree with it, actually. I think it's actually...
statistics. That was put out by this current administration, actually by Republicans. That statistic was put out by our government, that white men commit 90% of gun violence.
I'd have to see the statistic. Well, I would say that the most recent mass shooting in Canada was done by a transsexual individual who killed 10 people and injured 25 kids, including a 12-year-old girl who's fighting for her life. So I don't see how you can protect that, because one day you don't want to... You can't defend that.
A person who is violent is still a person who's violent, so I'm not defending that person by any means, but with the reality
but statistically they have a higher proportion, a higher propensity towards violence than the demographic group that you talked about.
And so do white men. Are we going to ignore that statistic that was put out by Republicans by the FBI?
I don't know that statistic is actually correct.
It's actually on the FBI website.
Well,
is that correct? Do you feel like our Republican people who are reporting these statistics are incorrect?
Well, there's an old saying, there's lies, damn lies, and then there's statistics. So anybody could probably show statistics that would support their point of view, so I'd have to look into that more carefully.
A Republican,
It doesn't take away from it doesn't take away from the reality.
Left agenda?
Well, it doesn't take away from the reality that many people were killed. Multiple people were killed with a gun, and most of those children were defenseless children.
But the target demographic of those shootings happens to be white men, and that was put out by Republicans. So are you insinuating, I'm speaking, are you insinuating that Republican people in office would lie to push a leftist agenda?
I'm saying facts is that in that particular case, it was not a white male. It was a transgender person who killed 10 people and injured 25 children. So
I'm not arguing
we're just talking about most recent. We can look at individuals.
But I'm talking about statistics.
We can look at general
I'm not talking
statistics.
About most recent.
I'd have to see the statistics that you're referring to.
Administration.
I'd have to see the statistic you're referring to. I don't know that it's true or not true.
So you don't keep up with school, like mass shooting statistics, even though you're arguing against trans people on the basis that they commit the most mass shootings?
I don't agree.
You don't know the correct statistics regarding that?
I don't agree with that supposition.
You
no.
can't not agree with facts and evidence.
I am not agreeing with it.
It's a common MAGA
I am
right?
not agreeing
facts
with
and
it.
Feelings don't
Well, now, why would you say
feelings.
I'm MAGA? That's an interesting comment that you would make right there, and that goes back to my your original question. Your original question, which is, we have two different points of view. To answer your question again, we have the people who are for the status quo, who want to make America great again, to use your term, and we have people who want to completely dissolve the current form of government, dissolve capitalism, and start over. What I'm suggesting is that would take literally centuries of public strife and civil war, and if we did that, it would never happen. Yeah, it's an interesting point. So even in slavery, the Democrats opposed slavery because it would have interfered with the country economically. So in today's, so the same thing applies today. If it were economically beneficial to keep slaves under, not go with abolition and keep slaves under slavery, then does that argument hold true today? Because why, they're holding Mexicans here, and a lot of times they're economically underprivileged or disadvantaged here in America. Yeah, I would think so.
I think the way that we would go about
so the end doesn't justify the
means.
means. So we can make social change without having civil war. But in that case, what did it lead to? It led to a civil war, right? Because we had a fundamental opposition. And I will say that it was the Democratic Party, Southern Democrats in particular, that opposed the end of slavery. So when we talk about, whether it's the right or the left, or, MAGA versus, progressives.
Right versus left. I'm talking about, violence against non-violence. So
what I'm talking about, I'm talking about the status quo versus starting a whole new form of government. And I'm much more in support of working with the government that we have, because I think we can do well with what we've got. It shows in history. We've got 250 years of history as a successful government, even with our challenges. What would result in hundreds of years of civil war and strife and economic disparity would be to do what the left suggests, which is to start over and start a new society. And even if they abolish capitalism and abolished ICE, and we had a world that had no borders, we would still have some authoritarian fascist ruling class that would have to manage the things that are going on. But right now, we have to go back to your question about, we have a representative form of government that has three branches to it: the judicial, the legislative, and the executive branch.
Ooh,
and they have,
of
course, they have three.
Don't.
Yeah, well, I'm an old guy, so I've been around a while.
Good.
But they have, but they have a balance of power. Now, does it always work to everybody's satisfaction and in everybody's timeline? No, but we see all the time where the president will come up with an executive order and the courts will strike it down, right? Or the courts will support it. And we have a legislature which, depending on the balance of the legislature, can change the laws. If they want to actually change the laws, I'll give you a good example: the SAFE Act right now. Do you feel like people should should have to show identification to vote?
Yes, to a certain extent. I don't believe that should have to be the same as your birth certificate, because there's many women who don't have the same last name, and I do believe that they should still have a right to vote. Yes.
So you think that it should?
I think that a real ID or a passport should be enough, and that's that.
So you think that people should have to show identification. So we agree with that.
Yes, a real ID, not multiple forms of identification with the same last name.
And did you know that when Congress votes, when they go to, so when you have a bill in Congress and a congressional representative goes to vote, they go to their desk and they have three buttons. It says One says aye for yes, one says nay for no, and one says present for not going to vote, but they're present for the vote. But they have to actually, so nobody can just go to that congressperson's desk. Like, you can't have their associate go and press the button to vote. Congressperson has to do what? They have to show their photo identification. So when Congress votes against showing photo identification for the people to vote, they're voting against exactly what they have to do to be able to vote to change the laws in our country. So there's a lot of hypocrisy in the system, and I don't think it's beyond expectation to be able to show. I mean, what other things you have to vote? You have to vote to buy cigarettes. You have to vote, or you have to show an ID. Excuse me, to buy cigarettes, to buy alcohol. Hell, even to buy spray paint. You know, you have to show an identification, and as well as to do many other things. So to be able to do some of the things, one of the things that's most sacred, like voting, is not beyond expectation that people should be able to, to be able to show an identification to do that.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So you talk a lot about going through like the actual processes and the legislative processes
Yeah.
to fix this and
Right.
make the situation happen,
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, what about our Constitution that's actively not being followed? Every person in the United States, U.S. citizen or not, has the right to due process and the freedom of press, might I add. And yet we're seeing active videos almost every day of those processes not being followed. So, I mean, what do you...
Criminal
do
law,
against that?
criminal law due process is required, yes, but under immigration law, it's not, and you have to go back to understand.
So you don't get to outrule the Constitution. The Constitution's the Constitution.
Not saying
you
that
you don't get
they're
to make
not
a new law
guaranteed. Anybody who is in a detention for an immigration detainer is not guaranteed due process.
So
No, that's
they can stay. You need to appeal that. I'm
right,
speaking.
and that
I'm
goes
speaking.
right back to
I'm
what we
speaking.
talked about
I'm
before,
speaking.
which
I'm
is
speaking.
the balance
I'm
of powers.
speaking. I'm speaking.
Okay,
Thank you. The reality is,
I'm just seeing what
Is
I
there
always like to watch.
something that's bothering you?
No, but I do like to
Standing
watch
up for
behind
myself
me
then.
because I do sometimes have concerns for my safety here.
interesting. So like I said, people are being arrested right after they go to immigration court, where the judge says that they can stay in the country, because that's how our processes work. You go to an immigration court and a judge tells you if you can stay or not, and being arrested immediately after. You can go above a judge, yes, but you need to appeal that decision in a court of law. You don't get to just decide when a judge is wrong at any point in time, especially not as a federal agency who is supposed to be upholding the law.
So,
and the reality is that is happening.
but here's a contradiction to that. So the federal government has provided generous opportunities to people who are here illegally. Up until the
I'm
end
not
of the
talking
year,
about people who
they
are
were going to
illegal.
give them $3,000
I'm not talking about
to
people who are
self-deport,
You're pivoting
self-deport and come
you're
back
pivoting.
into the country legally.
Doesn't seem like you're willing to have a conversation.
No,
at
I'm
least
willing
not
to have a
straightforward
conversation.
one, but I'm trying to ask you a direct question, and you're pivoting, and you're not talking about what I just directly asked you. You're talking about people who are illegal. I'm talking about people who are legal. So we can have a conversation, but we need to stay focused.
If people are here legally and the courts determine that they're here legally, then they should be able to stay here legally. They would not be deporting illegal citizens.
When those
legal
legislative
citizens.
processes fail us, what happens then? Because you're saying we should follow the legislative process and then we should trust our government to fix this. But what happens when those aren't being followed? Because you just said that you agree with that people who are allowed by a judge should stay here if they're following the correct processes.
Right.
So what do we do when that fails?
Speak with your congressional representatives about changing the laws to your satisfaction and see if they can do that, which is a slow and arduous process for a reason, but that's what Congress is for. So the executive branch enforces the laws, the Congress makes and changes the laws, and the courts interpret the laws. Whoops, you okay?
Yeah. Is my phone?
Still running okay?
It can take some
You sure?
minutes. Trust.
Okay.
Thank you, though.
All right. So that's the beauty of our system, and we're often accused of being Nazis and fascists and totalitarians, but we don't live in a fascist society. A fascist society would mean one person or one agency says this, and that's what
actually a
happens.
monarchy.
Okay, well, we don't live in a monarchy either.
So what
but
about
you know,
Venezuela?
I think there's as many
We
as
don't live in a monarchy, but what about
78,
Venezuela?
78 monarchies in the world. So monarchies are perfectly fine forms of government for many countries.
So you think that we should be a monarchy, or I'm confused at what you're arguing?
You're going to ask me if Trump should be able to be the king? You know, if Congress allowed it, I probably wouldn't oppose it, to be honest with you.
So you
but it would
agree
take a
with Trump
change. It would take a
being
change of the
king and ruling
Constitution.
monarchy?
I'm saying that
And
the
you believe
Constitution.
in changing the Constitution?
I'm saying that absolutely. The Constitution is a living document. Do you know how many amendments there are to the Constitution? You're studying law.
Oh, quite a few. I
How
haven't
many?
studied all of them yet.
How many?
20-something.
Okay. Yeah, there are. There's 27 amendments to the Constitution. That means beyond the original Bill of Rights, there are another 17 times that the Constitution has been amended or changed depending on the will of the people. And I would agree with you that the law of the land ultimately is determined by the will of the people, but the will of the people is expressed through congressional representatives, our congressmen and women and senators. And so they're the ones who are at liberty to change the laws if they find that the laws are unjust or unfair or not currently, effective.
Can I ask you something about something you said just a moment ago? So, who the hell is calling me? Damn it, I think it cut my recording. Hold on.
Oh,
Sorry.
no. Yeah, no, that's okay. I understand.
Nope, we're still going. Okay.
Okay.
So
We
you
just
said that
checked
you
here.
would, pertaining to our civil liberties and everything not being followed, because you agreed that people who are here legally should have the right to stay without being arrested, and that's not being followed, clearly. You said that the people, we have the right to, try to change legislative policy and stuff. Is that not what we're doing out here, advocating for ourselves? I mean, I see people out here every day handing out flyers to revoke the ICE permit or to put a restraining order on ICE using less than lethal rounds. So is that not what people are doing, advocating for our people? And
It is. It's
legislation?
advocating under the First Amendment right to the Constitution, which is in the original Bill of Rights. But is it changing the laws? No. Is
You don't know
it
that.
changing public opinion? No. And you're right. I mean, ultimately it might mean that there's a change in the laws, and ultimately it might mean a change. But is this doing it? No. This resistance out here, honestly, is futile.
So
Everything
what
that
is
they
your
do here
resistance
is absolutely futile. What this group should be doing is they should be organizing, and they should be going to the groups, as I mentioned, their congressional representatives, their senators, their mayor, their city council. They should be forming lobbyist groups, and they should be lobbying effectively. You know what they did last
You
Saturday?
think that we should
A
be
couple of
lobbying?
hundred
Do you
people.
think that should be allowed in politics to lobby money towards bills that you find necessary?
I wasn't talking about money. I was talking about
Okay,
political
like actual-
opinion.
okay.
Now, you're
Sorry,
right
I
that lobbying is
misunderstood.
part of money. But I'll give you an example. Last weekend, a couple hundred people grouped up at a park and marched to the mayor's house. The mayor wasn't even there, and they yelled like they're doing here. They're yelling at a closed building. They yelled at the mayor's house, and the mayor wasn't even there. That's not effective. If those people had gotten together in a political group and formed a lobbyist organization and lobbied city council effectively instead of storming the walls of the city council chambers, then they might have a little bit more effective results in what they're trying
So then what about
to formulate.
Then what about the restraining order that was just put on ICE to not use tear gas?
Well,
Is
again,
that not productive?
no, absolutely. It goes back to exactly what we've already been talking about. The balance of power in government is one that puts restraints on the three different separate branches. The executive branch was interpreting and carrying out a law in such a way that the courts determined was not within the guidance of the law. So a judge made a decision on it, and now the executive branch has to abide by that, and they're abiding by that, right? You've already seen a withdrawal from Minnesota. You're seeing a lack of or less use of munitions here in Portland. So to that extent, it's effective, but it's effective because of the system that's already in place. You look really cold. Are you cold?
Oh, I'm fine. I have extra clothes in the car.
Okay.
But, so, I mean, you agree with the fact that people should be advocating to change legislature. You agree with the fact that, ICE had a restraining order put on them for using tear gas so consistently. And the only thing you seem to disagree on with me is that you don't like these people out here. What if I told you that?
No.
a lot of
I
these
actually
people
like
were
these
some of the
people out here.
who
I do like these
advocate
people.
for
I do like these people. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But I like many of these people. I don't like it when they get aggressive or physical with me, or knock my phone down, or come up to me aggressively, which they do. And I don't particularly like the yelling and screaming, but that's part of the First Amendment. But when they start to get violent, then it becomes a whole different discussion, and it moves us from a realm of freedom of speech into other options. Now, do I like to fight and do that? No. Do I mind arguing with people? No. But there are laws that all people on both sides have to follow. And what we're all out here talking about is really the First Amendment to the Constitution. As I mentioned, there are 27 amendments to the Constitution, not just the First Amendment. So there are other constitutional amendments that we could be discussing. But the First Amendment is the one that seems to be the one that's most prevalently discussed out here. And I've had great discussions with people trying to find a common middle ground. And the other thing I would say about your point is that not just coming out here and advocating, as I said, people should be lobbying. They should be productively formulating and articulating their arguments and taking it to their elected officials at the state, local, and national level, or even running for Congress. You know, if you were 25 or older, you look like you're younger than 25. But if you're once you turn 25, you know, you could be a congresswoman.
A lot of people out here are actually, believe it or not, in court cases trying to get things passed and like
good, and that's a first step. Now, what's frustrating about that on both sides is when you lobby for legislation and action and it doesn't go your way, right? Because it all comes down to that red light, green light, or present vote. I mean, you have a vote, and depending on the makeup of the legislative body at that time, it's either going to pass or not pass. And I've got great examples of that. My great-great-grandfather was a congressman in 1890, and they proposed many, many things that would have changed the Constitution, which did change the Constitution. They were responsible for four amendments to the Constitution, including giving women the right to vote. But it didn't pass while he was in Congress. It passed 30 years later during the Progressive era in the next century. So, you know, the workings of government are slow, but they work. You know, they do work.
So what about the people that die in that process?
Yeah, it's, again, I don't like to see people die, but that's a great point. You know, our American flag, which these people sometimes tend to burn, that really does upset me, because I know people who have and families who have died. Those colors on that flag are red, white, and blue for a reason, because many people, including probably maybe some of your ancestors, have died defending our country and defending the flag and defending the principles that it represents. So I take great umbrage when people are so disrespectful out here, and it diminishes their point of view. I mean, there's one thing to have a philosophical or a political argument. It's another thing to do something like that. Then it becomes personal, and when, you know, and it does come down to the point where violence is an option. I mean, we had a Revolutionary War that was violent. In fact, my family was here before the Revolutionary War.
Violence is justified if someone burns the flag?
I think that it should be a crime to burn the American flag, yes.
That's your opinion. So back to what you said about a monarchy, if you don't mind.
Okay.
And by the way, I also have many family members who have served in the Army, and I'm very supportive of our military. However, I also see these people as fighters. But back to what you said about monarchy, you said you would be okay if Congress passed it for Trump to be a king?
Well, you know, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was a president. He was a very effective president. He was a Democratic president. He served 4 terms before they had a constitutional amendment to change to limit the amount of term. But that is a great point, because I do believe in term limits, and I think there should be term limits for Congress, for congressional representatives, and for senators. Did you know that the senator in Oregon, Ron Wyden, is now the longest-serving senator in this state, and he served for 44 years?
Isn't that insane?
It is insane, and I actually ran against him in 2022 because I was so, and my main point of view, one of my main tenets or planks of my candidacy was that I would vote and bring up a measure in the Senate to support term limits. I would have only served 1 term. I don't think, I think people are saying term limits should be 12 years. I think that's longer. It's longer than the president served, which is 8 years. So
you just say a minute ago that you would be okay with Trump being a king or a monarch specifically.
I said that personally, if it were to come up as an amendment to the Constitution, which it would have to be, and this would take an act of Congress and an act of the legislatures of the state, so it's not a simple process to do an amendment, but if that were to be the case, I look to Franklin Delano Roosevelt as an example, and I think that we're on the right track. I mean, economically, if you get away from the situation here at ICE, economically, in many ways, the country is stronger under President Trump. And I'll admit to being a nationalist because I've lived here my whole life, and why wouldn't I be a nationalist? Why wouldn't I support the policies and the practices of the United States of America? Then I think Donald Trump more matches my viewpoints than anybody. I think there are Democratic presidents who might have done better to serve an additional...
To answer my question directly, I'm sorry. You would be okay if Congress passed it and legislature passed it for Trump to be a king and rule as a monarchy? To answer my question directly. So
I didn't say a king and a monarchy, but I would support a constitutional amendment to increase the term of the U.S. president.
But what would be your limit on that?
Well, I'll tell you a funny story, just anecdotally, because you shared an anecdotal story with me. My family came here, one branch of my family came here from England in the 1700s, before the Revolutionary War. And I have some handwritten documents that outline how they were thinking at the time, and they actually opposed the revolution. They wanted to stay under British rule because they didn't want change. Just like I today, they wanted the status quo. I want the status quo. So it's funny because obviously it didn't work out that way. But just imagine if we had been under a monarchy and George Washington hadn't crossed the Delaware and we hadn't defeated the British, we might very well have still been a British monarchy, just like Canada. I mean, Canada's a monarchy. They seem to be operating pretty well, right? So a monarchy is not necessarily a terrible form of government. It's like I said, there's 78 countries in the world that operate under a monarchy, I think. You might have to fact check me on that. But there are a number of monarchies that operate around the world, some good, some bad. And I'm not purporting that we do that, but I am purporting that we that we stay under our current rule of law. It works out pretty well. Sorry?
I'm just listening in.
Okay.
You didn't really answer my question about, I mean, what would be your term limit to, like, increasing the presidential, like, term limit?
Yeah, I would say, I don't know. Let's see. What is it right now? 8? I mean, they're talking about giving a senator, if they institute term limits, and this has only been discussed, giving 2-term. Now, you know, a U.S. Senate term is 6 years. So if you gave 2 terms to a U.S. senator, they would serve 12 years. So if you're going to give a senator 12 years, why not give a president at least 12 years? I actually think that if the question were to be posed to me and we were to keep the president at 8, I would be more. I think a first step would be to put a term limit in for Congress. But you know why Congress doesn't institute term limits? It's been brought up many times. Because they're cutting their own throats. Why, if you're Ron Wyden and you've served 44 years and 6 terms and the voters love you, then why would you end that? It's a gravy train, right? They get paid tons of money. He's a millionaire, and he doesn't. You know, his family actually lives in New York, so he really only partially represents the state that he purports to represent. But the whole thing about Congress is we're supposed to be a representative government, and having someone in Congress 44 years. The no kings argument is absolutely ridiculous when you look at somebody like Ron Wyden, because 44 years as a senator is longer than most monarchs have served in their monarchy. So, you know, it's all a matter of definitions, I think.
Speaking of definitions, actually, what would you define our form of government as, specifically speaking around the Venezuela situation? Someone's calling me again. Okay. Sorry.
Our form of government is a constitutional republic, not a democracy.
So what about Venezuela? He went in without congressional approval, without legislative policy in mind.
That
he
was
went in and attacked Venezuela. So what about that?
That was an act. That was that was just like the cops coming out and are searching a search warrant.
Invading another country is nothing like having a search warrant.
You know that the leader of Venezuela was on the FBI's most wanted list. In fact, President Biden, the prior president, increased the bounty on his head.
But who are we to speak on morality of other countries or what they're doing and what policies they follow when we're not following those policies ourselves? Yeah, the justification,
the justification, yes, that's an interesting but trite quote. The justification for that was that we are killing tens of thousands of Americans on an annual basis by the flow of drugs, which is facilitated through Venezuela. So there are a lot of people saying it was for oil and it was for all these different reasons. But if you're going to have less people have happen to them what happened to the person around the corner when I showed up here tonight, I'm all for that because it's ruining our city. You know, to just bring it down to the local level, you know that the Chamber of Commerce, the Metro Chamber of Commerce in Portland, has recently stated that we are in a depression here, essentially, or an economic depression, and that's partially because of homelessness.
The economy was flourishing under Trump.
I'm talking about locally. In other states and nationally, we're flourishing, but in the state of Oregon, where they've instituted these leftist socialist policies, it's failing miserably. And the price of commercial real estate is down 70% in the last 10 years. There's an outflow of people. Crime is up. Drug use is up.
Let's say that all that is true about Venezuela, that they were on the FBI watch list and that, they were bringing drugs again. And
we won't have to say it's true. It is true.
Okay,
it was
sure.
true. Right.
Yeah, we're assuming in this scenario
in
that
fact,
all of it's true.
President Biden increased the bounty on the head of Maduro while he was in president.
It's my turn to talk. Thank you.
Okay.
So again, in this scenario, all of that is 100% true and factual and proven. We still did not follow the democratic policies we have or the legislative policies, and you would call that democracy?
Well, again, it's make sure your phone's okay. She dropped her phone, guys. Make sure we're still recording.
No.
Oh, sorry. You okay?
No, you're fine, you're fine.
I'll make sure it's going.
I had to fix it for a second. Honestly, I think I got enough for my school project.
You did?
Thank you for speaking with
You
me.
had some very good questions. I appreciate you, and I hope you keep up your interest in politics.
I appreciate having like a real conversation with me. I've had a lot of
I hope to see you on the
Republicans come out here just to argue, and it's not very productive.
No,
So-
I'm here to find a middle ground. I don't know that there is a middle ground. I watched a very interesting point of view today, but what I'm thinking is proposed, just in conclusion, is what we've got is a system that works and can work. It can be improved upon, but just completely eliminating the system and going to a society with no borders and eliminating capitalism, that's a pipe dream, and it would take literally decades, if not centuries, to do.
I mean, it is. They said that it would take centuries and that it wasn't going to be productive for African American people because they would be in poverty and da 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 da. I mean, do you think that we should repeal the civil rights
Common
movement?
sense
This is
prevailed.
off the record, by the way. But
Common
do you think
sense.
that we wouldn't want to have the civil rights movement?
Well,
based
that's
on
a
the
great
fact
question because, and I'll just say anecdotally, my great grandfather was a conductor on the Underground Railroad. You'll have to look him up. His name is William Bulla in Indiana. When you get back, check out Google William Bulla Underground Railroad, and you'll hear an amazing story. I'll tell you to it really quickly. So he was helping facilitate an escaped slave, and I forget the law at that time, but basically, if escaped slaves were caught, they have to be returned to their owners. And the owner was an owner from Kentucky. So this slave was traveling through Indiana on his way to Canada to escape slavery from a slave owner in Kentucky. The slave owner in Kentucky was a guy by the name of Samuel Todd, who happened to be the brother of Mary Todd, who was the wife of President Abraham Lincoln. So Samuel Todd, who was Mary Todd's brother, was actually a slaveholder in Kentucky before his sister married the future president of the United States that ended that ended slavery essentially. So there's an ironic point of view.
You didn't
But
really answer my question.
well, I'm getting to that point. But the whole point is that when my great-great-grandfather helped a slave, they were caught and they were taken to court at the time. And my great-great-grandfather, my ancestor, helped this slave escape out through the window. He literally physically helped him jump out the window of the courthouse so he could remain free. The slave got away and got free. My great-great-grandfather was fined at the time. This is 1840-something. He was fined $1,500, and it ruined his family economically, but he believed so strongly in his principles and in the abolition of slavery, they thought it was the right thing to do. So my question is, am I now eligible for reparations for the money that my family lost before that time helping slavery? So I believe in people expressing their viewpoints, and even when people take militant action, in some cases it's justified. But
you don't believe that this is just...
I think that at this point there's better ways to do it, and I think what you're seeing around you, just to summarize everything, 3 words: resistance is futile. Dressing up in costumes, riding around on skateboards, yelling at people,
And what about the
that's futile.
psychological implications of like the inflatables, for instance?
People are much better off doing what you're doing, which is studying the issues, going to school, studying law, formulating their viewpoints.
You know what else we're studying? Psychology.
Yeah.
It's a big field of study right now.
Yeah.
And the reason is
It always has
helps
been.
in scenarios like this.
Right.
Right. You know,
Right.
and so like when you actually study the the psychological implications of what they're doing in those costumes, mind you, they're also
but look at
studied.
what's going on over here. There's yelling and screaming. So I agree that this is a new paradigm that we're in, but this is not effective. This is not effective.
How do you know? It's never been done.
Well,
Can you see into the future?
Donald Trump is still your president, number one.
Can you see it?
Deportations will continue, and and ICE will still continue to operate in the way they've been operating.
Can you see into the future?
Can
you see into the future?
I'm
Can
just
you
seeing
know
into
it
the
for a
present right now.
surefire, but he has another 3 years.
Into the near
How do you
future,
know that this
yeah,
is
and you
gonna
know the way I can understand the future is because I follow politics and I follow the legislation, just like
So
we've
you're
been talking
saying-
about.
You're insinuating that you know for a surefire fact that this is.
I'm saying it would take a change in the laws of the United States,
like I said
and
before,
maybe
many of
even a
these people
constitutional
are
amendment.
going to
Now,
the
but
legislative processes.
remember what I said. There's 27 amendments to the Constitution already. There could easily be a 28th amendment to the Constitution. Now,
What would that be?
huh?
And what would that be?
I think it should be term limits. Honestly, if there were the next one, some people think it's an equal rights amendment. I think it should be term limits. Some people might have to do with immigration and open borders. Again, if it were to come up to a vote through the legislative process, that's what's great about our country. We are not don't let people fool you into thinking that we live under a fascist dictator. We live under a strong president who is limited by the powers of the Congress and the powers of the courts. And he operates within that structure.
How action should be taken. I think that we have a lot of the same perspectives, but we just disagree on how those processes should be changed. And we can disagree on that.
Well, in 50 years, when you're as old as me, I'll bet you'll feel the same way I feel, and you'll look back on this conversation and say, you know, that old man was right. Well, I appreciate your time. We done? We good?
Yeah.
All right, stay warm. Nice talking to you. Good luck. Jesus, that took a while.
Very good conversation.
How'd we do?
though.
Yeah,
Very
she asked some good questions. I got to go check my car, though, you guys. I'll be right back.
I was just saying.
Were you? Look good? Nobody down there?
Yeah.
No ne'er-do-wells? I'm so worried because I don't want to park it over here. Were you guys here that weekend when they dumped trash on it? What happened?
I was just going to say you were good.
What happened?
Oh, I was just going to say you might not want to give our location.
Oh, right. Oh, they've already doxed me, but I hear what you mean. Yeah, I'm bad about that, by the way. So but I mean, she came up to me and she knew my name. Not Iceman. She knew my name. They all know my first and last name. In fact, the girl who was down at the corner last week when ISIS was there, the girl that took Shane's phone and tried to run away.
Oh, that one.
She came up to me earlier in the day and she said, "You're boom boom," and she knew my first and my last name, which really doesn't bother me. I mean, it's not that hard to find, but I haven't been like fully doxxed where people are coming around. I was a little bit worried, about Travis, and there's a couple other people, but most of these people are, they're not gonna take, steps unless they do it in a group. The mob mentality is what gets them, and that's what happened one day. I was down here, and something happened, and I pissed him off about something, and I came around the corner, and a fucking bag of trash was on my car, and I have a decent car, and I take care of it. And I was fucking pissed, and I was not in a talking mood that day, believe me, put it that way. And it ended up escalating, but we got over it.
Yeah, that was a very good conversation. I was learning a lot there too.
She asked some good questions, but I try to thwart those youngsters and let them know what the hell's going on. They pissed me off. All right, guys, I'm going to run down there. I'll be right back. I'm good. All right, you guys, so we're going to take a quick walk. That was a long interview. That young lady had some good questions, and I think she was very fair in her question answering. She was better than the trans witch was with her questions. Trans witch always had like gotcha questions, and that girl tried to give me a few gotchas, but I think I got a couple gotchas back to her. So I don't know if you guys are watching this. Shane is down here now, Ground Zero PDX. He's always got a much, much better stream than I do. So I love that you guys are watching me. All 1,000 people. Wow. He was just talking about my family. Robert Todd was my 4-time great-grandfather, Mary Todd. Yeah, that's interesting. So, there is somebody by my car. I got to keep an eye on him. So, yeah, that's an interesting story. So, if you guys heard that, Google William Bulla, B-U-L-L-A, and Underground Railroad. He was in Indiana. I think it was called, there's an article that was in a Notre Dame paper called The Station Master, and it's all about William Bulla and this whole thing with the slave and the slave trade. But that was interesting. So Samuel Todd was he was actually a colonel in the Confederate War. He was killed in the Civil War. He was a Confederate colonel in the Civil War, and he was the brother of Mary Todd, which, as you guys know, Mary Todd later became Mary Todd Lincoln, the president, the first lady of the 16th president of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, who ended the Civil War, right? So it's very, very interesting. And they lived in Kentucky. You can look this all up. So the Todd family was from Kentucky, and they were slave owners. And this is all before the Civil War. But they had, oh God, what do they call it? The Slave Sedition Act, or the Slave, I forget. You guys can Google this while I'm walking around here. But you can basically correct it. I'm going to stand here and just make sure nobody fucks with my car, because this guy is like got his lights right on my car here, which I don't need to see. So anyway, this slave, and I forget his name. I should know it now. I wish I had the reference in front of me. But he escaped his slaveholder, this Todd in Kentucky, and he headed north, and he went through Indiana. And my ancestors at that time lived in the area of South Bend, Indiana. In fact, they owned land that was adjacent to. This is prior to the formation of Notre Dame University. So when Notre Dame was actually formed, a portion of the land that they took was from William Bulla and his family. So William Bulla was a Quaker, and he was an abolitionist, right? He was from the North, and he believed in abolishing slavery, and he worked in the Underground Railroad. So when this slave of Todd escaped and came north, he helped him to get north. So they sheltered him, and they were trying to get him north, but they got caught. They got caught by like the local sheriff. And then so they ended up going to court. And when they were in court, literally in front of the judge in court, this ancestor of mine, Bulla, helped this slave escape out the courtroom window. And there was like a wagon outside the window with some other slaves that helped him get away. And he eventually got away, and they never talked to him again. He ended up apparently or supposedly getting off to Canada and getting his freedom and getting away. No, hold it. Let me see here. I think he got away, but what happened was the judge fined my great-great-grandfather $1,500. This is in 1840, so that's like a whole year of salary. And he was a Quaker, so he didn't make much money, really. And it totally set back his family, in a terrible financial way. And the quote at that time from Samuel Todd, the slaveholder, was, "Well, Mr. Bulla, you can do that all you want, because every time I get a N-word," and he used the hard N-word, "you pay me $1,500. So Todd had to get paid the $1,500 from my great-great-grandfather because my great-great-grandfather helped this slave get away. And that was the story of this. Oh, Robert E. Lee was my great-great-grandfather. So this is great. I love hearing from you guys in the chat, because this is super awesome to hear about this. And the more you guys learn about your family, it's great. So one said he was just talking about my family. Robert Todd was my 4 times great-grandfather, and Mary Todd was my aunt. Yeah, so that's great. And I'll bet they were probably from Kentucky, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. So anyway, this guy said Robert E. Lee was my great-great-grandfather. So when you talk about these historical, when you read about them in history books, that's one thing. But when you realize that you have a personal connection to these people, you realize how far we've come as a country and how far we've come here as Americans. And the reason I'm hanging out here all by myself right now is because there's some guy who's been sitting here the whole time I've been sitting here, and he's right behind my car, and he's got my car, and he actually has remember I was saying they have a bag of trash? So this guy has a bag of trash right next to his car, and I don't want that bag of trash to end up on my car. So we're going to go and let's see if I can get his license plate. It's NYVR. Looks like, I don't know what kind of car that is, a Chrysler or something. So remember that NYVR. I'll go down to the corner a little bit here, so hopefully we can get a little bit different viewpoint. That way I'm not hovering over this guy. But yeah. Anyway, we've got a long history in this country, and we've had some ups and downs, but it's the legal process that worked, right? In fact, if you look back at the history of the country, God, I'm trying to think of this other guy's name. He was in that movie Lincoln, but when Lincoln was assassinated, the vice president became was Andrew Johnson, right? I think he was like one of the worst vice presidents or presidents. The president that succeeded Lincoln after Lincoln was assassinated was one of the worst presidents. But there was another guy who was very, very pro-abolition. He served in Nebraska alongside William Jennings Bryan. That should be a familiar name. Some of you who have watched my stream before know all this. But William Jennings Bryan was one of the most prominent figures in American history. He was actually a Democrat, but he was known as what was called a fusion Democrat. And the fusion Democrat was somebody who basically was a Democrat by registration, but espoused the populist beliefs. And even in this day and age, populism is something that's come up as a as a very common theme in American politics, even to this day. Now there's I guess what you would call Democratic populism and Republican populism. So populism was a distinctly third party that leveraged between the Republican and Democratic parties. Actually, the populists of the 1890s were very staunchly anti-Republican. So they leaned more heavily towards the Democrats, but they had their particular points of view. They wanted term limits, they wanted an income tax, they wanted to have silver added to the monetary standard, they wanted, they were talking about women's suffrage, and they were also talking about eliminating the consumption of alcohol, which they believed in. But those two policies or planks were so controversial at the time that they decided to leave them out of their platform because they knew that they wouldn't be able to get their people elected. The way the populists started is they started as something called the Farmers Alliance, and this great-great-grandfather of mine was a farmer in Nebraska, and he was very politically oriented. The problem that the farmers had is that was back in the early days of the railroad, and so what would happen is farmers would all get their crops, which obviously become ripe at the same time, essentially, and so they would bring their crops with their wagons down to the local train yards, and the owners of the train lines would basically beat them down on their prices. So the farmers would work the whole year to get their crops to market, and when they would go to sell their crops based on what they thought would be a fair price, the market was saturated, so they would beat the price down. So Omar Madison Kem was a farmer, and he started the Farmers Alliance, and it actually started as what's called the Grange Party. So farmers all used to meet together, and they still do, at something called the Grange. And then it turned into the Farmers Alliance, and he was very, very active. He went in his horse and his buckboard, and he went all around the 3rd District in what was called the Big Third at that time of Nebraska, western Nebraska. He was from a little town called Broken Bow, and he went around the state and lobbied heavily. And to make a long story short, he won the election in 1890. So he became a congressman, and the 1st district of Nebraska was won by William Jennings Bryan, which was in the eastern half in the area of Omaha. So they went to Congress together, and there's a great story about him, William Jennings Bryan, and one other person who rode together on the train back to Washington, D.C., and there was a wreck on the tracks of the train, so the train got stopped for a couple of hours, and they were really hungry. So William Jennings Bryan and my great-great-grandfather and this other guy, the other congressman, they got off the train, and they saw this farmhouse like a mile away, and so they ran over to the farmhouse while the train was stopped. And when they went to the farmhouse, this lady had like 3 berry pies sitting on the windowsill cooling. So they knocked on her door, and they're like, "Hey, we're really hungry. Can we have your berry pies?" And she capitulated, and so she ended up giving them the pies. And he talks about this time. So I always have this vision of him and William Jennings Bryan and this other congressman eating these pies at this lady's farmhouse out in the middle of nowhere in Nebraska on the way to Washington. So that's just one of the great stories he had. But he became great friends with William Jennings Bryan, but they had 2 totally different political viewpoints, and they also had different religious viewpoints. William Jennings Bryan, as many of you know, was a devout Christian Presbyterian, and Kem was actually an agnostic. He didn't believe, he was actually a spiritualist. So they had differing political, they had similar political viewpoints, but they had different religious viewpoints. So anyway, it's a great story. You'll have to look it up. They put garbage on your Jaguar. Yeah, that was a while ago, so that's why I'm still hanging out here. I've got the custody. I'm getting these 2 nice people. Oh, they're donning. They're taking off their costumes now. But we had 2 of these guys here. They're getting into their car too. This car down the block, if you can see with the lights on, he's like right behind my car, and it's kind of pissing me off because if I go around the corner, I'm afraid they're going to put garbage. There's a bag of garbage right next to that car, so if I leave, it may be, hey, how you doing? So, and obviously there's some teepers that park here as well. These guys look like they're a couple. They're kind of cute. The unicorn and the bear, they're always hugging and holding hands and stuff. So you always have these kind of comic moments when we're down here. All right, so let's see here. Robert E. Lee was my great-grandfather. Yeah, Abe was my uncle too. Has anyone done 23andMe? Yeah, 23andMe is good. I use not Ancestry.com, but MyHeritage.com is a really, really great website. And all you got to do is enter some basic information, and you pay a little bit, but it is totally worth it. It is actually, it's captivating. Like, it can take so much of your time, and you get so many discoveries. It's actually amazing, and it'll tell you a lot about your family and your ancestors. But what's even more interesting is this Omer Madison Kem. He wrote down his memoirs. So when he was 84 years old, he had 8 children, and he hand typed 8 copies of his memoirs. Each memoir was a book of about 1,000 to 1,200 pages, and there was 11 of them. So he literally had like thousands of pages of his history. And then he also traced his genealogy, and he also carefully documented his experiences with the occult and spiritualism. So he had a very, very interesting legacy. One of these days, I'm going to share it with you guys, but I could talk for hours and hours and hours about this. And I know I'm being boring down here, but this guy is not moving. So I want to move my car, because I have a feeling if I leave, they're going to get out and come fuck with my car. I'll take approach. I don't want to go on the other side of the street, because I have a feeling if I get in the shadow of this building, it's going to drop my signal. So you guys tell me if I'm buffering or not. There's always these kind of nefarious characters hanging around, so you never know what they're going to do. I have Comcast, and this is a Comcast trunk box, so you'd think I'd be getting a pretty good signal here, right? But yeah, check out this dude. He's like in this black car, and I feel like asking him, what the fuck are you doing? Because he's got his lights on. Maybe it's just somebody that left their lights on. I don't know. The lights are, he's completely darkened out. So I might go move my car somewhere else. I don't know. Can you guys see? Is there somebody in that car? Can you guys tell? That's what I don't like about tinted windows, is you can't tell if there's somebody. It looks like there's somebody there, and he's on his phone. So last thing I need to do is come back to four flat tires. All right. Maybe I should go not be so paranoid, right? I could pull it around the corner and pull it over here, which is a little bit better, but it's still in Queefer land, so you never know. I guess I could pull it into that station over there. And my problem is if I go over to, for some reason, this is a bad reception area, and if I hang out here too long, it drops the signal. That spot right there that's also open, that I keep an eye on a little bit better, they know my car, and that's where it was when they pushed the garbage on it. So I think I might